Transformers 1 is finally here over in the UK. For some reason, despite the fact that the US release was, like September 20th, in the UK it was actually October 11th, because screw us, I guess. And to be fair, I wasn't crazy excited for this movie when I first heard about it. This just looks like another weird reboot, now animated with some cringe jokes in it. Or at least that was very much the first impression I got out of the trailers, and it turns out this is just outright a sleeper hit of a movie. I would go as far as to say I think potentially this is one of my favorite movies of the entire year. To be fair, their rivals are the likes of Garfield and Despicable Me 4, but this movie is surprisingly brilliant as just a love letter to all of Transformers, which is ironic for me to say because I came into this movie with absolutely no knowledge of the Transformers universe. In the 80s, when they were making the cartoons of Transformers, I wasn't around in all of existence to actually consume that, and the live-action Michael Bay movies, I just didn't really get into that much. If anything, I was a little bit of a hater of the Transformers universe. I'm not a big car guy, I'm not crazy about metal or mechas, and I certainly couldn't understand any action sequences I might have seen on YouTube of the live-action Transformers movies. So to see this reboot that takes a completely new direction, going right back to an origin story, entirely set on a completely different planet, was a beautiful, fresh start that a newcomer like me absolutely needed. Not to mention, it's not even made by any of the big major studios that we come to know. It's not Pixar, DreamWorks, Sony, or Disney. This is, I guess most definitively, a HasBro film. Or maybe a Paramount one, but that's kind of hit or miss. And actually, with HasBro being the production company behind this, they're seeming to make some actual movements now. Ironically, these are the guys that own Monopoly. Funny that. They're also making a Monopoly movie. This was the first HasBro film of this next category of films coming out, probably off of the success of Barbie doing well. These guys are also making everything out of every toy IP they own. There is a Magic the Gathering movie, there is a Clue movie, G.I. Joe is getting 2 installments, and one of them is a crossover with Transformers, and a Play-Doh movie. Because we need a Play-Doh movie, of course. And funnily enough, all of these potential movies are being made by different studios. Some are Sony, some are Paramount, some are Lionsgate. Let's see how that goes with the old AI company over there. Either way, this is the new wave of toy-related productions, Power Rangers not included. And not only did I find this super refreshing to see a whole new story and by a different production team, but wow, is this movie surprisingly brilliant. I think one of the best ways to describe it is it really hits at the core of satisfying your inner child. As someone who's getting to see this world for the first time, I am just enamored by the world building. The idea that there's an entire planet that is the Transformers form of a giant original Transformer, alone, that is incredible and interesting to hear about. To then see there's all these things like robot deer on this wildlife on the surface, where there are these rock formations that grow and shrink. There's an entire city of Transformers, some without a core that are smaller than the others and have to mine an energy resource to fuel the rest of the planet. It's just endlessly fascinating. And this story does a very simple and standard thing of seeing a character at the very bottom of the social hierarchy, a nobody with no core as a miner in this society, building their way up to more and more upgrades to eventually becoming a prime. Along the way, we then of course see our characters turning into the titular characters that we know in the future. And I don't think there's any spoilers to say, hey, the guy who's gonna be Megatron turns out to be Megatron. Is that, Plus, you've probably seen this movie 3 weeks ago anyway. But for me, a guy who knows about Transformers probably at the latest possible stage, I really loved this movie. Sure, in a lot of ways, this has the standard trope of being surprisingly standard and safe because it is the first installment, but even what is safe in this Transformers universe is still endlessly interesting. To see these trains that come and build tracks in front of them had me enthralled at just seeing every animation beat, because also, yeah, this film is just visually stunning. It's got a specific style, and it's not exactly Spider-Verse or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I think it's satisfying enough and works really well to adapt these very robotic characters in a form that's still relatively smooth and nice on the eyes. And that's not even getting into the surface of the planet, where there's this brilliant twilight from the setting sun and the likes, as well as all the artistic choices, like seeing D16's eyes slowly turning to red and having those little flares that follow along when they move sometimes. And then beyond the visuals, whilst the actual plotline is relatively simple, Miner goes and upgrades along the way, discovers that their whole world is a lie, goes back to fight against the bad guy, and then their friend turns out to be the bigger bad guy, all the while kind of crossing over to a Bug's Life storyline of of the miners have to make all this energy and they need more because they're giving it away to some other bad guys is its own, standard, as much as that sounds complicated when you say it all out loud right there. What is especially good on the writing front, beyond the simplistic plotline that does its duty so you know you can be satisfied with a first film to then lead into future films, is throughout everything else is just a love letter to all things Transformers. And I don't even know all things Transformers, but practically every element of Transformers seems to have been touched upon to parody or homage in some way. And some of it, I don't know if is done for the first time or not here, but I love it anyway. Being able to kill one of the bots by transforming, twisting their body around to rip them in half. Brilliant. Even one of the opening gags of "Watch me transform," it does all the cinematic shots of transforming and then cuts to them running away. Mwah! Brilliant. I think I just really like parody comedy. It's kind of like the next level beyond just Marvel quipping, and genuinely showcases an understanding of how the world of Transformers works and lives and functions, and then subverting it in ways that's satisfying for every audience member to see. And if you're liking this video, you're halfway through, come along and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much. I love simple things like within action sequences being able to dodge a headshot by sinking their head partially into a transformation. And one of my favorite gags of the whole film, surprisingly enough, is Keegan-Michael Key. Not when he's talking, Bumblebee can be a little annoying, and that's the point, but I loved the shot of him becoming a car by all means other than the wheels, and then his hands are just out there flailing around. Such a simple, kind of obvious parody gag. It works so brilliantly well that I just adore it in so many ways, and I don't even know all of the things they're referencing. There are these big splays of all these primes that you see at multiple points, really. I don't know what any of their names are, but there they are, and I'm sure if I did know it, I'd be just gushing to see that kind of representation on screen so succinctly. It's funny that the marketing seemed to showcase all of the worst jokes and not a lot of great qualities, when in actuality some of the more parodious elements are some of the highlights genuinely throughout this movie. It's a really funny movie throughout. The only real thing it's missing, other than a slightly more subversive plotline, is the fact that there isn't that crazy of an emotional core to it. There's a little bit, there's that betrayal, there's some like moments in there, but there's not quite that, Pixar makes you cry element that would elevate it to be along the levels of Spider-Verse and Mitchell's vs. Machines. But even then, I'm still well and beyond satisfied with the outcome of this movie at the end of the day. And there's still all sorts of other things for me to gush about. Seeing for the first time how the magic system works and the different power scaling was genuinely interesting to see all unfold over the course of 100 minutes? And there's even some of those epic scale blah moments in there, such as, I guess here's the spoiler territory, when Orion Pax is dropped down into the core of the planet itself and is then spoken to by Primus and given the big MacGuffin that they need. The fact that there is just a core that is the soul of a being, because the whole planet is somewhat alive and can speak to you after reaching what you would assume is death and the worst point a character can be. It's just like a brilliant, great, epic story beat to then progress into becoming the Optimus Prime. Across the board, this is brilliantly written. It's written safely from a business side of things, because surely this is going to expand into so many episodes from this point, not just because it's got the potential to, but because this is owned by HasBro and certainly works as its own universe in a little bubble. But then this is clearly written by people that absolutely adore the franchise and are doing a great job to adapt it into a whole new form. That this is my favorite adaptation. It's the only one I've seen, but I would say that. But the point still stands. The performances of the actors were brilliant throughout, I would say. Keegan-Michael Key's role is a little bit, annoying, but that's the point. I'll leave him be on that. And it'll become all the more distressing, as I do know that Bumblebee does end up having their vocal cords ripped out, and they'll probably show that in the sequel of some sort, and, that's brilliant in its own way. The closest thing to a real gripe I have for this movie really is the fact that it didn't finish off the couple of its story threads, namely the Bugs Life quintessens. They're the guys stealing all of their energy. They removed the guy that was giving them the energy. They don't come back. There could have been another final fight scene against them, but I guess it kind of makes sense that they don't want to do that, considering there are a lot of action sequences in this movie. And I've seen that be a complaint by other reviewers, saying they can't quite understand what's going on. I don't think it was that bad. Compared to how some of the cinematography works in the live-action movies, I think this is well and beyond more passable to understand. It is a little bit funky with people transforming and half-transforming, and I don't know if that's the case usually in Transformers movies, but yeah, I think it's fair enough. You can understand most of it, and I think it's fine. I really liked the action sequences. It's just prowess of animation. brilliant to see. Funnily enough, the likes of Michael Bay and Steven Spielberg were involved in this movie in different degrees, even if not directly as the director. So it's clear that this film is produced by a stellar team of, actual experts and professionals, and I guess that really shows by the output of the whole damn thing. Historically, I have absolutely no information about the Transformers world, but after seeing this initial movie as my introduction to the whole thing and the origin story of the entire saga in general, I am just enthralled by the concept of this. If I watched this film as a kid, I would fully be invested in how Transformers works, and yes, I probably would have bought a couple of toys as well. The power system is so intriguing, the world building as the planet expands out as we see it is just fantastic, and I think this has some real grand potential going forwards for future films. Hopefully being a little bit more subversive and less safe compared to, this initial movie, but hey, I had the same complaints about the original Sonic movie and all sorts of examples like that. It's fine to be safe for the first one. Let's really kick it up for the future. Although I say that, one of the production teams, there are several that are involved in this movie, but one of them, DB Pictures, also did Madam Web this year, so it's kind of highs and lows in all ways, and this might be a marker of just trying to copy the success of Barbie. It is HasBro involved, they're not always the best at what they do. We'll see. The marketing, turns out, was just way wrong for a first impression of this movie, but this, if you haven't seen it 3 weeks later, is a serious hitter, I would say. One of my favorites of the entire year. Pixar's Inside Out 2 would probably be the closest rival, but I really enjoyed this as a refreshing story to see. Installment 1 over a sequel that's covering the same traits as the last movie. Maybe I like Transformers more than Inside Out 2 at this point. Whatever the case, I adored this movie. This was a fantastic 100 minutes for me. Can't wait to see how they ruin it with episodes upon episodes of installments upon installments. HasBro doing their toy factory thing. And apparently one of the future ones is a crossover with G.I. Joe? Yeah, okay, we'll see how that goes. For now though, I'm gonna end it off there. There's my little review of Transformers 1 for those of you who haven't seen this movie yet. Why does the UK get these things 3 weeks later? I don't know. I haven't even seen The Wild Robot yet. I get to see it in 2 days, and that's still 5 days before it's meant to come out here. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Let me know of any other Transformers suggestions you have if I should get into the universe a little bit more. And I shall see you in a little bit.